In this video, I'll be showing you all of the techniques that I use to create this Laughing Jack creepypasta artwork in Photoshop. Hey PM gang, my name is Dean Samad, I'm a pro horror artist from the UK and you're tuned in to photomanipulation.com. If you're new here, welcome. We're not your typical Photoshop channel, we specialise in photo manipulation, digital art and advanced Photoshop techniques. If that sounds like your kind of thing, be sure to like and subscribe as we put out new videos Monday to Friday. It's free, easy and really supports the channel. Let's roll the video, enjoy. So I saw this really awesome Laughing Jack mask online and I was inspired to create a piece, and after a bit of digging around I discovered that it was a creepypasta character called Laughing Jack. So in this Photoshop walkthrough I'm going to break down all of the techniques that I use to create this piece. I'm just going to hide these layers here, just give you a rough breakdown. In this tutorial I'll be covering the techniques used for the backgrounds, the background blur, the advanced compositing and processing techniques used for creating the character. I'll be showing you the overall global processing, the over details and scratches and tear marks, as well as the final processing. And I'm just going to show you this reference here. What I wanted was the Laughing Jack character that you see here. So this mask was the main inspiration, and then I wanted to replicate or kind of steal this style here that I saw on this creepypasta photo, and I'll also show you how the depth of field blur was achieved as well. I just want to set your expectations before we start. This is an advanced Photoshop channel, so newbies are 100% welcome, and for you guys I've included separate walkthroughs for every single individual technique that's used in this tutorial. So a lot of the techniques that we use for compositing or processing, we use them over and over again. So there's dedicated tutorials for every single skill if you want to get up to scratch with all of those. They'll all be linked in the description and added as cards on this video as well. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the time lapse and see how this piece was created. So the base for the actual Laughing Jack face that I used was an image from Adobe stock. It was a deranged looking clown mask, quite scary in its own right. And I thought, well, that would make, because of the cheekbones and the creases and the wrinkles, I thought this would be a good starting point. Another thing that drew me to this photo was the razor sharp teeth. Really impressive, gnarly looking teeth on this one. So I wanted to keep them in place. The process that I'm using for compositing here is my go-to. It's using the pen tool and then filling that path for only the solids on a layer above, and I call that a solid mask. So this is my preferred method, and I've not actually seen anyone else use this method for compositing, but if you're interested, there is a full tutorial in the description below called how to cut out and composite figures. So the pen tool was used for the solid areas, and then for the hair I like to use a freehand lasso, fill that with white on a new layer, and then use the refine edge function to get the edge details. There's a little trick in play here for getting rid of those edges, that's using the clone tool, and there's a dedicated hair tutorial in the description below that goes into all of these tricks in depth. Another trick that I like to do is separate the hair from the face. So if I want to do any color amendments to the hair itself, then there's a selection layer that I can control and click, or I'm on a Mac, so that will be command and click that layer. It will create the marching ants, and at any time I can edit the hair independently from anything else. So if I want to darken the hair, then it doesn't affect the face below. So here you can see that in action. With that selection active, there's a new layer filled with black based on that selection. It looks a bit scrappy here. You'll see how things progress as they move on. But with that selection, you can copy and paste the original. So in this case, I wanted the hair darker. I created the selection and then went Command and J, Control and J if you're on a PC, and that copies and pastes the selection onto a layer above. And very straightforward, just set those duplicate hair layers to multiply and it instantly darkens. That's a trick that I actually use quite a lot. To pull the color out of the hair, a gradient map was created, which I believe, yeah, black and white gradient map, my favorite method for creating black and white or duotones. So that was straightforward, a selection based on the hair, duplicate those layers, change it to multiply, and then every so often I'll bounce back and forth into that reference mini mood boards that are created just to see that I'm on the right track. One of the main reasons that I like to use selection masks is that I can independently go in and tweak and amend different layers. So the skin, of course, was too pink. When we look at the reference mood board, the Laughing Jack face was very pale. So with that selection loaded, for this one I use a levels adjustment layer and pushed the blacks, tweaked the midtones, pulled the whites. I know levels command isn't that fashionable. Get lots of comments saying curves are better. They probably are, but me personally, I like levels because they're fast and they're easy. Another go-to method for processing for me is the selective color tool. Anytime you want to access the adjustment layers, just go to the little circle icon at the bottom of the layer stack and select your adjustment layer that you want. All of these, the transparency is controlled using the layer mask. For all you guys familiar with layer masks, black is invisible and white is visible, and you can use selections or brushes to control the transparency of that given layer. Okay, so the mask, the pixels were a little bit crispy, so I've gone in, I wanted to push the levels using clarity. Clarity is a detail enhancer, and that is accessed via filter, camera raw filter. So if a stock image or a layer is a little bit weak, sometimes I like to push the clarity. There you can see the pixels aren't all that nice, so using the camera raw filter, push the luminance up a little bit, add a tiny little bit of grain, and that smooths out and homogenizes and gets rid of some of the grody looking pixels. And then on top of that, what you can do is throw an unsharp mask on top of that. Now, my personal style, the way that I like to work, I like things really sharp and really clinical and really precise for an uncomfortably real looking composite image. That's what I've become known for. That's how I've made my name in the book cover industry, because my work looks different to a lot of the other guys because of the methods that I use. So that's the kind of signature look for me, is having very sharp details. Again, here I am creating a selection layer. So what I want is a new layer with an outline of the lips, and that's done with the pen tool. And at any time I can command and click that to create a selection, and with that selection I can selectively edit just the lips. So here I've used the go-to gradient map for doing a black and white process. Using that same selection, copy and paste in the lips, and then bang that to multiply, my super fast darkening technique. And as this one progresses, you'll see there's a lot of housekeeping going on. So when you've got a composite with loads and loads of different layers, it's good practice to have them organized into layer groups. Checking back on the reference mood board to see that we're on the right track. Every so often I'll dip back into that and see what's going on. Okay, so for the eyes, you'll see on the layer stack there's an eyes mask, exactly the same as with the lips. I create that mask and then I can refer back to that selection. I know you can do alpha channels and things, but I'm a visual guy. I like to see all of my selections in the layer stack, and to activate them I could just command and click on them at any time, and I just like the speed of that workflow. So I've got a conical mask here. Because this was a personal piece and not a book cover commission, I would use elements that I don't normally use for my commercial work, my book cover work. So if I was doing book cover work, it would all be premium stocks, just to make sure my authors don't get in any trouble. But because this one was done for fun, you'll see as the time lapse progresses that I just grabbed bits from here and there. So stuff from e-commerce stores or wigs or ruffles, different elements. But yeah, if this was a commercial gig, I wouldn't touch any freebie or Google image elements. So the clarity trick, filter, camera raw, and then clarity, just to punch out those details a bit on the cone nose. Levels adjustment layer to push the blacks, the whites and the midtones as necessary. I'm a levels guy, I don't really get on with curves, so you'll see levels used a lot in my workflow. Okay, so we've got some hair action here. I didn't really like the hair that came with the clown mask, so I done a search on Adobe stock. I use Adobe stock for my book cover work, and found a lady with pretty wild anime style spiky hair, which matched the aesthetic of the Laughing Jack character. So the technique I'm using here is my go-to hair technique. It's just freehand lasso, grab the bigger strands. To add to the path you hold down shift, and then to subtract from the path you hold down alt. Create a rough selection around the hair and then go refine edge, and you can see me removing a few bits there and grabbing the side bits. So as with everything else, I'll make a selection layer, and there you can see me command and clicking to create a selection and then accessing the refine edge just to bring out some of the feathering on the edges. Now I'm using an older version of Photoshop here because I really like the refine edge function as it is in this version of Photoshop. Yeah, I'm a bit of a stick in the mud. I probably will upgrade soon. No, I'm running a YouTube channel, but just this version of Photoshop works really well for me, so I just held off from upgrading. This is a little trick for grabbing, for taking out the fringing on the edges. You create a new layer above, add a clipping mask, and then with the clone tool, just clone parts of the hair and paint it onto the edges. That's included in the cutting out hair tutorial that I made, which is linked below. So Turbo Karen. Yep, that's definitely a manic Karen haircut if I ever saw one. So there was a bit of housekeeping there on the Laughing Jack. All of the elements for the Laughing Jack face is within its own layer group, and a layer mask was added to that group. And then the transparency was controlled using the lasso tool, so I didn't want the existing hair to be showing. I just chopped that out using a lasso tool filled with black. A gradient map adjustment layer, and then a clipping mask in this instance. So hold down alt between the adjustment layer and the layer below, and that will restrain everything that's going on in that adjustment within the pixels of the layer below. So I don't always use clipping masks, but sometimes it's a fast method for keeping all of the adjustments within the pixels of the layer below. So of course the hair's a bit wacky. I merged all of the hair elements so it's one layer, and then just used the freehand lasso tool to draw a selection around, hit V, move it where necessary. You can also use selections to control this stuff. And here I've really quick and dirty just grabbed an eraser and knocked those bits out. Taking a look at the reference again, just see that we're on the right track. I believe, yep, this is what's going on. The hair was duplicated and I wanted a swoop of hair going over the eye. So duplicated the hair layer, hit the warp tool, gave it the bend that I needed, hit enter, and then position that in place on the Laughing Jack figure. You'll see that in action once I've done the tweaking and the bending. So move that in place, get the correct amount of swoosh, free transform to activate that, that's Command and T. Add a layer mask, freehand lasso, select inverse, and then fill that inverse with black so it only shows the element that's needed. Little zoom in, zoom out, see how it's going. Right, so we needed an eyeball upgrade. Again, Adobe stock. About 80% of everything I use is from Adobe stock. I've got a subscription on there, and it's when you're doing freelance work, it just saves you so much time if you can just grab exactly what you need at the best quality straight away. When your income and your rent depends on your speed and efficiency of doing artwork, then getting premium stock is a no-brainer. We've taken flack on videos before for using premium stock, but in our day-to-day commercial work, that's what we use. So it'd be disingenuous to not use that in the videos, because we are the intermediate and advanced channel. And if anybody's serious about pursuing a career in freelance digital art, then premium stock is absolutely essential. So for the eyeballs, they were put in a layer group, and using the eyes mask, the selection layer that was made earlier, the transparency was controlled using the layer mask. So the eyeballs, the illusion is that the eyeballs are within the sockets. Now I know it looks stupid right now, but you can use an adjust. In my case, for the demo, an adjustment layer can be used to darken the edges. So adjustment layer made, soft edge brush, painting in the darkening around the eyes. And because all of this is happening within a layer group, it doesn't spill out of those pixels. It's all, everything that's happening in that group because of the mask is happening within that pixel area. I use layer groups a lot in my workflow. A lot of the composites that I do, there's quite a lot going on, quite a few different layers, so I find layer groups to be handy. This is just an e-commerce image that I grabbed online. I took the bottom and the top off using the pen tool, used the blend if. Blend if's great. We've got loads of videos on blend if. I'll link one in the description below by Abby Esparza. Just to tweak the blacks and then move that in position using free transform. That's Control and T on a PC and Command and T if you're on a Mac. So the ruffles in place, and then for the feathers, it's literally, I know most people wouldn't do this, but I like to have things sharp and looking good. So I went round, I cut mine out with a pen tool because I like to have full control on those edges. I don't really ever use any quick selection or quick masking tools. I know it's faster, but there's just something about it for me that I like to have the full control. So the same method used for the feathers, used for the jumper. Just grabbed a jumper from an e-commerce store, cut it out using the pen tool, put it in place, and then for a quick and dirty darkening method for the jumper, you can just duplicate that and set the duplicates to multiply. And here you can see the duplicate, set that to multiply, and there you go, you've got your darkened jumper. And you can Command and J to duplicate that as many times as you want to get the desired darkness. So we've got the laughing jack there, we've got the spooky eyeballs, the cone nose, the feather, the ruffle, the feather boa kind of thing, and the Tim Burton-esque stripy jumper. Now this is a bit of a go-to for me for creating backlit scenes, and it's simply a white ellipse, so a circle filled with white behind the figure, and then filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and that creates like a vignette gradient, like a circular gradient, radial gradient behind the figure. And I like to use that because I do a lot of creepy artwork. I like to have that dramatic backlight. So at this stage of the project, with the main figure done, it's a case of shaping the light. I like to have dramatic center lighting, backlighting, and for lighting I often use a levels adjustment layer, and then selectively paint it in with a mask and the soft edge brush. And for this one, the original jumper, I added a layer mask to that and tapered it down at the edges to create the illusion of the light, or the shadows tapering off at the edges. So at this stage, with the figure in place and a very basic background, it will most likely be global processing and some final tweaks. So here I pulled the saturation down on the main face, punched up the levels a notch just to bring out those whites even more and increase the intensity. So I was experimenting a bit here with exaggerating the eyeshadows. So at the moment it doesn't look that good, it's just a soft edge brush painted with black. I thought we need a bit of texture here, so camera raw, add a bit of grain to it, and then I thought I'll give blend if a go, see what happens. And there you can see me tweaking the values. Now blend if, to move those sliders, you hold down Alt and grab one of the sliders and move it back and forth, and it's you do it by hand and eye. You just experiment, grab the sliders, pull them back and forth, and they will change the way that the pixels on that layer interacts with the pixels below, be it darks, lights or midtones. Dedicated tutorial for that by Abby Esparza, links in the description below. So this background here is a go-to. I've used this quite a few times actually. I really like it because of the light source coming out the window and the vignette and kind of radial gradient that's already in place for this background. It normally ties in very well for these kind of creepy scenes. And if not this image, I've used a lot of different images of haunted house interiors with the light spilling in from a window. I think it's a really nice framing device. Now, because I wanted to replicate an analog photography look, we couldn't have a super sharp background, so I keep coming back to this reference image. I scroll down, I look at it, and I think, okay, the edges, there's like an iris blur. So Photoshop actually has an iris blur function where you can replicate that depth of field. So you go filter, blur, iris blur. You get this ellipse, and you can control the height and width of the blur, and then to the right or within the circle in the middle you can change the blur intensity, and this is a real good go-to for instantly creating a depth of field effect. Really effective. As we get towards the home stretch now, everything you see here is about global processing. Now, global processing is where you make process and adjustments that affect the entire image instead of being selectively applied to different areas or different elements. And this is really handy for unifying a piece toward the end of the project. Dust and scratches, these are textures from Adobe stock. Because it's got a dark background, you change that to multiply. It will knock out the darks, and then you can go levels to push the darks, so you can control how much of those white dust specks come through. For this one, I didn't want all of it there, so added a layer mask, used a brush with a bit of texture, and then painted out the dust flecks that I didn't want. I didn't want overkill, I just wanted a couple. So because I wanted to copy the look of a found analog photo, like a old vintage photograph, I wanted some like edge tears and folds and things. So grabbed a couple of images off Adobe stock. They already had black backgrounds with the white creases showing. The same trick as with the dust. You change that to multiply. That will knock the blacks out and leave only the whites. Paint away what you don't need using the layer mask and a textured brush. In this instance, I used a brush that was actually a spray paint brush. I wanted to add a bit of grain here to replicate that grainy analog photography look. So I love the grain that's built into the camera raw filter. So that's filter, camera raw, grain. So I added that grain to a stamped layer. Old aged vintage photography wouldn't have really sharp deep blacks. So the method that I use for reducing the intensity of those blacks is levels adjustment layer, and then for the output levels just grab that black slider and you can pull back the blacks really fast in an effective manner. More creases, folds and tears, same trick as before. Set it to multiply, transform it as you need, Control T or Command T, and then tweak the opacity. And if you need to take anything away, add a layer mask, use a brush and tweak things as you need it. So we've got more creases, more folds, same drill as before. Change the layer modes to multiply and then tweak and move as necessary. Use those layer masks to control the opacity and visibility. So we're nearing the end of this one, guys. Just the final stretch now, the final few creases and folds. I hope you enjoyed the creepypasta walkthrough, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe, as we're putting out 5 top tier videos every single week. We're a brand new channel, so we really appreciate your support so far, and if you know anyone else who'll enjoy these vids, a share will go a long way. That's it for this one. I'll catch you at the next video. See you then.